I am going to go ahead and move forward in the question. I do want to say this, that I often choose to just share one question at a time. For me, it's not in the number of practice questions that are given, but more or less in the detail, the content, and the conceptualization of the question. And whether you're answering one or 10 practice questions, I think that if you're able to utilize and process and use the strategies that you have to answer one question, then yes, you'll be able to process and work through the other questions. Now, keep in mind that there are three different types of questions, really, kind of two. You have recall and then you have application and reasoning. You can either couple application and reasoning together, or you can look at them separately. A lot of times, when I teach, I kind of teach them, in a way to understand that they're three. So you have the recall questions, and these types of questions are basically those questions that are going to be assessing your knowledge, what you know of the particular content core area. Either you know the information or you don't. And a lot of times it does not involve any deductive reasoning or analytical skills. It's more or less a retrieval of information from your memory bank. Um, the application type questions are really assessing your ability to apply skill to your knowledge. So here it is, your knowledge base, what you know about the situation and what's going on, and what skill is appropriate, what skill need to be applied here in this particular situation to help the individual work through their situation and their resolve. And then the last one is, we said recall, application, and then the last one is reasoning. Well, every situation, there should be some kind of reasoning behind it. Why it is this, why it happens this way, why this apply as opposed to that. So what's the reasoning? What's the rationale behind what makes this more appropriate than that? And so that's why I say the application and the reasoning can be coupled together, but then sometimes the reasoning, because you have to analyze the scenario in great detail and kind of pull it apart and be able to reason your way through that, then that could be standalone as well. So we got recall, application, and reasoning. So let's take a look at the question that I have for you guys. And it reads as such: a social worker has been working with an adult male who is intellectually disabled. His goal is to someday live on his own, but for now, he resides with his older sister and her husband. During his session, he told his social worker that he has met a woman over the internet and they have decided to move in together. How should the social worker respond? A. The social worker should be outwardly supportive but should contact the man's family to discuss his plan. B. The social worker should point out potential risks associated with moving in with a stranger. C. The social worker should respect the man's right to self determination and praise him for finding a way to live independently. Or D. The social worker should help the client identify what services he will need to move when he moves, right? Okay, so let's take a look at what we got here a little bit closely, a little bit more in detail. So we have a social worker who has been working with an adult male who is intellectually disabled. Let's highlight that. It's an adult male. However, there's a descriptor here, and that descriptor is letting us know that he is intellectually disabled. So I say we need to pay attention to that. Okay, because that gives us a different language and a different understanding of potentially what could be going on here. So, the social worker is working with an adult male who is intellectually disabled. His goal is to someday live on his own, but for now, he resides with his older sister and her husband. So he is staying with someone. He's not living on his own, but we do know that there is an established goal, right? And that established goal is to someday live on his own and quite possibly be independent. So we know that this is not a new client and that this is an established client because they've already gotten to that phase of developing goals, right? And so, um, one of his goals or his goal is to live independently, as it states, um, at some point in his life. But for now, he resides with his older sister and her husband. And I think it's safe that we can say we can, inference here that the sister is his caretaker, his primary caretaker, which is why he's living with her because he's not capable of caring for himself independently at this particular point. And I think we can also safely say this is probably why he is, you know, working with the social worker. The social worker is helping him develop some adaptive skills, helping him learn some basic life skills or, gain an understanding of what it means to be independent. And so we can only, just inference all different kinds of things or assume all different kinds of things. I really don't like that word. I don't want to say assume anything in terms of what's happening with him. However, being that he's intellectually disabled, he's living with he's living with his sister, he has a social worker, and his goal that has been established with this social worker is to live independently on his own. So we got all that. All right. So during his session, right, he told a social worker that he has met a woman over the internet and they have decided to move in together, right? So when we're looking at this on a bigger scale or larger scale, um, what needs to happen here is first we need to figure out what is the situation or the problem that we should be addressing, right? We need to figure that out. We need to know who that person that is having that problem or that situation, and we need to know what our instruction is, right? And that's going to come from the last sentence. What is this last sentence telling us to do? Well, we know that the person that we're dealing with in this here scenario is the man with the intellectual disability, right? And I'm highlighting that simply because that's a descriptor. They gave that to us in advance. They wanted us to know that he was limited, that he had a disability, and that his disability is intellectual in nature, right? And so we can't take off that qualifier. We cannot discount that piece of information because it's important. And we also can discount the fact that he's an adult. So it's not like we're dealing with a child who's intellectually disabled, but we're dealing with a whole adult male, right? We're dealing with an adult. And not a child. So that does make a difference as well, and we need to keep that in mind. But here it is that we have this adult male that is living with someone and not living on his own. And he has a goal that he's established with the social worker to someday live independently or live on his own, right? So when we say live on his own, we can safely say, or we can, kind of pull together that he wants to be independent, right? If we're reading between the lines, right? He want to be independent and live on his own. Um, and so those situations are not the problem. That's not what we need to be focused on here because he have a goal to, live to work to live independently. The problem is not that he lives with his sister right now, and the problem is not that he's intellectually disabled, right? We know that he is. We know that he lives with his sister, and we know that he want to live on his own someday. So what the real issue here is, the thing that we need to highlight and pay close attention to is that he actually came into this session and he told you that he met a woman over the internet and they've decided to move in together. That's a big decision. Here it is, you just met someone and all of a sudden you're going to make this life changing decision to move in with him. Now, he's an adult. Now, here it is. If you came to your parents or you came to your friends and you told them, hey, listen, I met, such and such, and we've decided to move in together with each other, and this is what we're going to do. Some folks might, try to discourage you against it, but at the end of the day, you're an adult, and whatever the choice or decision you make to do with your life is the choice and the decision that you make to do with your life, and can't nobody really stop you because you're an adult, right? Same thing here. This is an adult, right? And he wants to move in with this woman that he met on the internet. Who's to stop him? Or should we stop him? Or could we stop him? Well, let's look at this. He's intellectually disabled. He has a caretaker, which is his older sister and her husband, and he's working with a social worker. And one of those goals is to live on his own, to be independent, to live on his own. So that suggests something. That suggests that he's not in a position or a state in his life where he is capable of doing that. And so we have to keep that in mind when it comes to being able to answer this question. So, how should the social worker proceed? All right. And that word proceed is a word that suggests what is it that the social worker is going to do, or how should the social worker move forward in addressing this situation, dealing with this issue, helping this man, work through or make a healthy choice for his life, right? How does she assist this man with this situation? So here's our four choices. Now, again, there could be a multitude of ways that we can really address this situation and handle this situation. However, for the purpose of the exam and for the purpose of test taking, our focus is only on the four answer choices. So, my goal and my desire here is not to fill your head or your mind with other ideas of what else could be done and why this shouldn't be done because, but my focus here is to help you learn how to concentrate on the four choices that's given and select the best of the four choices given. So let's go tunnel vision for right now and let's zero in on the four choices. And our focus is on the best. Now, I want to eradicate the word the correct answer because there could be several different correct answers. There could be several different ways of answering or resolving an issue. But we want to go for the best giving of the four choices. I know I'm running it in over and over and over again, but my hopes is by keep saying it repetitively over and over again that your brain will kind of connect with that and begin to think through that as you're studying and practicing on your own. You're going to remind yourself that I'm looking for the best answer, not the correct answer, and that I'm only focused on the four answer choices given. So here we have A. The social worker should be outwardly supportive, but should contact the man's family to discuss his plan. Or B. The social worker should point out potential risks associated with moving in with a stranger. Or C. The social worker should respect the man's right to self determination and praise him for finding a way to live independently. Or D. The social worker should help the client identify what services he will need when he moves. Okay, so all in all, we always want to go for the elimination first. We want to look at those situations that we could just eliminate because it just doesn't address the situation. It doesn't deal with the problem appropriately and is a little too far to the left or too far to the right, or however you want to describe it. But I always like to start off with that. And for me, it was easy for me to say no to D and why. Okay, so the social worker should help the client identify what services he will need when he moves. Well, there's a couple of things wrong with this because it's just okay, ignoring the fact that there's an intellectual disability that we're dealing with. So he's ignoring that he is intellectually disabled, and that a goal was established to work on moving toward living independently, right? And so, if we have that established goal, then we want to make sure we start putting things into place to help him work through that. And so, this is just kind of jumping to what services he's going to need to live. And he needs so much more than just services. And that word services, got me thinking in terms of social services, what he's going to need in reference to living independently, but not looking at budgeting, not looking at finances, not looking at, so we're kind of just discarding all of that, right? So that's a no for me because there's a whole lot more that goes into play. And so I was able to say no for that. I went to A where it says the social worker should be outwardly supportive, but should contact the man's family to discuss the plan. It's kind of like still in the same line of D, being supportive of this man who is looking forward to moving in with someone that he's never met before, and know nothing about. And so to support that would really be putting this man in harm's way, would be setting him up for some potential risks and some dangerous situations. And so I can't say that that would be the best decision without really processing through and asking the right kind of questions and looking at the totality of the situation and getting a better understanding. And just to say, oh, wow, that's great, um, I'm happy for you. And if this is what you really want to do, then go ahead and do that. Let me give your sister a call and make sure, she has some plans and everything is set up for you so you can, make this happen. That just doesn't, sound too plausible. So I'm discounting A. And so that left me with B and C. Now, there's a word or a situation in C that was pretty much a distractor, and I kind of had to kind of look at it again and pay attention to that. And so, that word self determination, if we're not careful, we see that word self determination and kind of just want to zero in right there. He's an adult, even though he's intellectually disabled, he still has a right to self determination. So, because of that, we want to go ahead and support his effort because, he found a way to get out there and live independently and all this other stuff. Yeah, maybe, but not in this situation. Because in this situation, even though it's not outrightly stated, you and I both know we have some safety factors here. We have some risk factors here, we don't have any protective factors around that can pretty much assure his safety. And so there's a lot of red flags and a lot of, other potential risks that we need to consider. And so because of that, I need to err on the side of safety, and safety always trumps all. And so because of safety, I'm going to go with B and stick with B and say the social worker should point out the potential risks associated with moving in with a stranger. And so that's the best way out, given the four answer choices here, even though there are so many other things that went through my mind when I first read this question, and how I would really, in my own work life proceed with this particular client. But I'm not even going to go into that kind of a dialogue, because what I want to help you do is train you to focus on just paying attention to the four answer choices. And so with this choice, we have an issue of safety. We have a man who's intellectually disabled and he's not capable of making a healthy and sound decision on his own. And so therefore I can't see myself supporting his decision and giving him the go ahead. I can't see myself, and highlighting, self-determination and putting him in harm's way. And I can't just discount the fact that he does have this disability. And with that being said, what's all entailed, what needs to be taken into consideration, even as he moved toward independent living. And so before proceeding, I need to have that conversation with him to help him understand the potential risk factors that are associated with moving in with someone or making a decision to live with someone that you don't know. This person is a stranger. We teach our children all the time about stranger danger, about talking to people who you don't know, about walking off with people you don't know. And there's a reason that we do that, and there's a reason for doing that. Well, even though this gentleman, he's an adult, even though, he's, over the, age of being considered a child, intellectually, there's some challenges. And so with that, we have to take his cognitive ability into consideration and be able to make sure that we help him with making healthy, sound decisions. Make sure we want to educate him and provide him with as much information as possible. We always want to err on the side of safety. And because of the choices that they left me with here, I have education and safety, all bundled up into this one particular response in terms of how I will proceed. And so for me, the best answer choice was B. Given the choices that have been provided, I'm sticking with B. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I hope you was able to kind of see what I did here and gather some ideas in terms of how to look at the question a little bit closely, and to kind of, process and reason through what's going on here. This is not a recall question. This is one of those questions where you needed to pretty much process and reason through. You had to analyze, so it was more of an analytical question, that you had to pay attention to the details that was given. You had to draw some inferences. Drawing inferences is very different than making assumptions. And you had to take your knowledge, your prior knowledge of what you know about the intellectually disabled, and couple it with the information that's given here and synthesize that, pull that together. So, with that being said, you took your prior knowledge, pulled it together with the information that you do have here, and saying that what you know about individuals who are intellectually disabled, they're a vulnerable population. Given that they're a vulnerable population, we have to take that into consideration. Here, he's an adult. His right to self determination, all of which he does own that and he does have that. However, in this particular situation, we have some issues of safety, and because of the issues of safety, we have to err on side of that, and we have to make a very different decision. And that decision will come with educating this man and helping him understand what he may potentially be getting himself involved in. Now, after educating him and providing him with some tools and helping him understand, what he may be getting himself into, if after all that and he still still says, hey, I want to move in with this woman, then we have to look at the situation again and very differently. But that's after, providing with the education, and implementing some other intervention and some other tools to kind of help him understand. And then if he kind of really want to make that happen, and then it would, again, safety should always trump. What I would do is put some safeguards in place to kind of help facilitate that process, if it was a process that could actually happen. Meet the woman, set up a safety plan, help make sure he have access to this number or that number, make sure there's somebody that's always there to check in on him, make sure there's a traveling case manager, all kinds of stuff. I could come up with a bazillion different ideas of how that would happen, but I don't want to get off target or get off focus or get off task, but stay focused here with safety and education. And so with that being said, B was the best choice. All right, here's the rationale that this particular question came along with. So I adapted this question from the social work test prep. I found that on a social work test prep. I changed it around just a little bit, changed some things up a little bit, just so being conscious of copyright. Copyrights. But I also want to give credit to the person that originated and wrote the test question. So here you have it, the social work test prep, and here's the rationale. Pointing out the potential risk of moving in with a stranger is the best course here given the safety concerns. Social workers should respect clients' right to self determination in most cases. However, if a person's plan is potentially dangerous, or if a person lacks the capacity to make healthy decisions, there you have it, the social worker should use professional judgment when responding. Okay, so acting supportive to the client while expressing concerns to the client's family would be deceptive and likely undermine the therapeutic relationship. Safety concerns in this case eclipse the man's right to self determination if the social worker thinks the situation could be dangerous. Since this man has mental, I took out that word, mental retardation. I'm sorry, I didn't even read the rationale. Since the man has an intellectual disability, I don't like that word, and I thought that word was, kind of removed. Since the man has an intellectual disability, he is at risk of being taken advantage of. Moving in with a stranger is not likely in his best interest. Since the client might not end up moving, the social worker should not immediately begin linking the client to resources. Instead, the social worker should discuss potential risks involving and learn more about the plan. So, the rationale is pretty much in line with what I was sharing with you guys. I tend to not read the rationales until after. I'm done processing and talking through the questions for a lot of different reasons because I like to see if mine align with what they're thinking is as well. Um, and so, like for problem D or the yeah, just overlooking the fact that this man has an intellectual disability is is highly you're putting him in a more dangerous situation by doing that. So that's all I have for you guys. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was useful. um, I would love to tell you when I'm going to put up another practice question, but I really don't know. It's just whenever time allows me to do so. Um, and so, whenever time allows me to do so, I'll share. But until then, um, continue to enjoy, and I will talk to you again real soon. Thanks again.